is March 3rd, 2021, and I am Dr. Krista Burris. And that's Dr. Michael Kim. And
how are you
we're
doing
here
today,
from
Dr.
Direct.
Burris?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's a little cloudy here today, but
yeah, it's actually like a reminder that we're not quite into summer yet. So I'm enjoying the cloud cover today. Today is the March 3rd of 2021, and we're here with Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care to talk about the state of our valley as far as it pertains to coronavirus, the illness, the testing, vaccines, everything. And if you're following us live, go ahead and ask any questions, and we'll be able to respond to those now or even later.
right. If you put those questions in, we can always answer them after the show as well.
Yes. So I thought we'd start today with just going over the numbers, and then we could talk a bit about where we are in vaccine rollout, as well as the coming tiers, plus some of the questions that we've been hearing people asking about, what can I do now that part of my family's vaccinated, or the grandma and grandpa have their vaccines. So we'll hit on that, as well as talk a little bit about what's happening in the youth sports and school coming up in our valley. So I don't know if we've got our first slide ready to go, but if we do, we'll take a look at it. This is our daily summary from March 3rd, so from today, and this is for the entire Riverside County. And what you'll see here over there on the left is our new cases are at 173. That is continuing to come down. I've decided to ignore the probable cases because that number hasn't changed in a long time, and I think they've just left it there and stopped reporting new numbers. I don't know exactly why they haven't changed it, but I don't think that we've had the same number of rapid tests positive every day for the last week. I think that's highly unlikely. So I think that number I'm just going to ignore. So overall, things are still improving. Our hospitalizations are at 300 with under 100 in the ICU. So I'm very, pleased that at least in the Coachella Valley, things have continued to slowly decrease. And in Riverside, we haven't really hit a plateau yet, which is very encouraging. Let's go all the way to the bottom. And you'll see here, this is our test positivity rate. And we've actually made it under 5% test positivity, which if you look at it, it's not even red tier anymore. That's like orange tier. So we're nowhere near moving into the next tier, but overall this is definitely a good thing. And however, if you look, our testing numbers are also drastically declining, and we really don't want to go too much lower. I'm a little concerned because so much of the testing resources and attention has been redirected into actually giving vaccine. So while that's understandable, we have to remember not to drop the ball on testing, because that could come back to bite us in the butt if these variants gain a foothold without us realizing they're here. So next slide. This is our weekly summary for the Coachella Valley for last week. And again, same trends, continuing to really decrease the number of cases. Our hospitalizations are improving. Our ICU numbers are kind of hovering there around 10, but that's not a huge change over the week, so pretty stable. And then our positivity rate's around 5.6. So looking at all this, again, nothing too scary going on in the data last week. And next thing is a picture of our history of the epidemic in the United States from the beginning until now. And the reason I wanted to show this to people is so that they understand where we are. And if you look, that first bump back there was in January of last year. That was where it hit New York. And then that second bump was last summer. And I don't know if people remember, but last summer was actually, we were having a lot of illness, a lot of people in the hospital and dying. We had, several hundred in the valley at any given time were in the hospital. And then this big peak that we just went through was our winter surge. And we really sort of drastically come down. And then over the last week or so, we kind of plateaued. And if you look at that number, it's still higher than we were last summer in this peak. So that's why, even though it feels like, oh, we're out of the mix, we've got the vaccine, we're good to go, it's actually, we're not quite there yet. It just feels like we are because it was so bad over the winter. But we still have a ways to go to get back to a level of transmission where it would be reasonable to relax a lot of our restrictions. We aren't even down to where we were before the surge started. So I just want to show people this graph because I feel like psychologically, I'm also struggling with the feeling that we're out of it, we're done. I hear people say all the time, oh, great, it's over. Okay, we can go back to normal now. And that's in sight, but we're not there yet. And we could still have another surge. And so knowing that we're not quite out of there, we really don't want to be massively relaxing our approach to things quite yet. And that, I think, is going to come up. I want to set the stage a little bit for what we're going to talk about in this next part, where we're talking about our own behavior as regarding our vaccinated status and what do we do now that we have this increasing immunity within the community. So I'm going to put that out there. So that's it for the slides today. So, Dr. Kim, what do you want to talk about next?
I think we should talk about what you were saying about. I guess we can start with the vaccines, right? So we have the Moderna and the Pfizer that's been out for a couple months, and now the Johnson and Johnson is going to be rolling out. And I guess the first question I'll ask you is, which one should I get? If someone asked you, hey, Dr. Burris, which vaccine should I get?
My answer is whichever one you can get is the one you should get. If you told me I had all three vaccines in front of me and I could take my choice, I would probably choose a Pfizer or a Moderna. But if you told me, I don't know when I could get you a Pfizer or Moderna, but you could have a Johnson & Johnson right now, I would totally take that one. The numbers, when you look at them side to side, people are thinking, oh, well, the Johnson & Johnson Moderna or Johnson & Johnson's inferior to the other two because they have like a 66% number of preventing moderate or severe disease, where Pfizer and Moderna have like 95%. However, they were tested at different times, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has actually been tested. Their studies were run against the new, more resistant variants. So we know that both Pfizer and Moderna have a lower than 95% efficacy against those variants. We just don't know what that number is. So it's not really 66 to 95. It's 66 to something less than 95 that we don't know what it is. And then the second issue is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. You only have to have one dose to get that amount of protection. And the protection against, severe disease is 85%. So it's really pretty good. Having said that, everything that we've just said, every single number we've thrown out there, none of them is 100%. And that was in the studies where everything's in ideal controlled settings and every vaccine's been stored exactly carefully and been given exactly the right way in these really rigorous study protocols. So we know in the real world, with a whole bunch of people who have all sorts of different underlying health conditions, it's never going to be quite as good as it is in the studies. So we have this really good vaccine, but it's not 100%. So I just want people to understand that no matter which vaccine you get, you're not bulletproof.
No, I agree with you. I think the answer is whatever vaccine you can get, because they're all very good. Even if on paper, like you said, the Pfizer and the Moderna, it's just because it's a different way of giving a vaccine. It's a totally brand new technology. But the Johnson and Johnson vaccine is still good in the way we get out of this pandemic. One of them. It's not the only one. I know a lot of people are saying, "Hey, once you vaccinate," I don't truly think vaccination alone is going to get us out of it, but it's a big part of it. So the more people we can get vaccinated with whatever vaccine you can get, the better we're going to be, even if it's one Moderna or Pfizer. I know that's not how it's supposed to be done, but one is better than zero. So whatever you can get, if we all do that, then we can beat the timeline of the variant, because that's kind of what the clock is ticking against, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. If we can keep the public health measures in place and continue to ramp up vaccination before the variants start spreading rapidly, because they're already here, they're already spreading, they're already being found, and they will cause another surge. And we will end up with a whole lot more people in the hospital and having to shut down again even further before we have enough people vaccinated. I was going to make a little chart for people so they could understand this, but imagine there's a bucket with like 300 balls in it. Each ball represents 1 million people. And right now in the United States, we probably have about 3 of those balls that are immune because they've had moderate disease within the last 3 months. And then there's another, at this point, 2 balls that are immune because of vaccination. But that still leaves like 294 balls that are 294 million people who could spread disease. So we're a long ways away to getting to that herd immunity, either because of natural infection or because of vaccination. So just because it's rolling out, just because we're vaccinating 1.5 million people a day, it's going to still be a few months before we hit that herd immunity. So if the variants have a chance to spread first, we could end up in a serious pickle this summer, and I'd rather not.
So why are the variants there? I mean, is that something that's new to coronavirus? Is it something that was expected, or?
There's been variants since day one of this virus. In fact, every virus there's usually variants. These mRNA, or that's the vaccine, but the RNA viruses, like a coronavirus, is prone to a lot of mistakes when it copies its genetic material. So basically, there are hundreds and thousands of variants out there. It's just that most of those variants are not as good at transmitting the disease. But if there's these hundreds and thousands of new variants every day, every now and then one of them comes along that the genetic mistake that was made actually makes the virus better at spreading. So most of the time, those genetic mutations create a virus that doesn't go anywhere, but every now and then it creates a better virus. And so you get a variant. So in this case, the longer a virus is spreading and the more people who catch it, the greater the chance that you'll end up with one of these variants that's a bad one. So the people who study viruses have been following this since day one. It just wasn't really in the media until recently. But yeah, we've been hearing about the variants for some time in the medical world because virologists study them. And they study them for all the viruses. I mean, there are variants of HIV, there's variants of Ebola. I mean, it's not something new. It's just not something that we usually talk about in the media.
Right. So the longer the levels of coronavirus are high, and we're all spreading it around and around, there's a greater chance for one of those variant mutations to become more dangerous and then replicate because it's now spreading in a lot of people. Is that fair to say?
Right. Right. And the main concern is that a variant would develop that would be different enough that the vaccine wouldn't work at all, and people who previously had coronavirus wouldn't be immune at all and could get it again. And believe it or not, that's what we do with influenza every year is we're constantly watching for those genetic changes and altering the vaccine every year. And that's why people have to get a new flu vaccine every year, one reason. And it's possible that with coronavirus, we'll end up with a similar picture where every year you get a booster shot of the new variants that happen to be circulating. We might end up in a situation that's like that where we have periodic updates to the vaccine that we get.
Okay, so let's say right now we know the vaccine works and it's good against the current strain of coronavirus. You and I have gotten both shots. What can we do? What can't we do? What are your thoughts?
Well, I know that psychologically I feel safer, and I think that impacts my choices. Like, I may be more likely to sort of browse through a store, take my time. Maybe I'll go to the mall, whereas before I might have ordered something online. So I think that it's changed my behavior, but I also think that I have not changed my behavior when it comes to masking and to keeping my distance from other people. It's just that I feel a little more comfortable engaging in activities where there are going to be other people around. I've heard several public health officials talking about if there is a small group of people who've all been vaccinated, and when I say vaccinated, I mean 2 weeks after their last shot. So 2 weeks after the Johnson & Johnson, which nobody is yet, or 2 weeks after their second Pfizer or Moderna, you're considered fully vaccinated. And so at that point, a small group of people could actually get together inside without masks. However, you wouldn't want to include anyone in that group of people who had not been vaccinated. So that would include children or younger people who hadn't received a shot yet. So that kind of puts a damper on the idea of like getting together with grandma and grandpa without a mask. So at this point, we're in this zone where, in our families, maybe some of us have been vaccinated and some not. So if you're still wanting to have an event where you have a range of people, and if there's some non-vaccinated people there, it's probably still safest to do it masked and outside. But if everyone's been vaccinated, getting together with a small group inside without a mask is actually now considered low risk. Not no risk, but low risk.
Right, for sure. And would that be a strict kind of bubble again, or can you invite other people? So let's say, we're vaccinated. Do we invite other people over? Do we go to other people's house for dinner, or even if it's outside? Or
So if, again, if there's even a single person there who's not vaccinated, then you would want to do it as if no one was vaccinated. So moving things outside, wearing masks, keep your distance. If everyone had been vaccinated, it's fine to be together inside in those indoor maskless events. But again, this is a small group of people. I'm not talking about necessarily going into a room with 300 people. At this point, it's like in home, maybe a couple, a handful of people, like 5, 6. Again, it's all about levels of risk. And in that setting, you're talking about people who are all fully immunized, who, even if one of them were spreading virus, the other people in the group shouldn't have a risk to get sick because they've been
right.
immunized.
And I think the caveat, even though it's really tiny, it's gonna happen out there. Doesn't mean you change your practice, but just like the hepatitis V vaccine, I had to take it twice because the first round I didn't develop any antibodies. And so there is going to be that person who got the COVID shot, the vaccine, didn't develop antibodies and doesn't know it. And so they're no different than someone who've never had the vaccine. So that's the only caveat, is we don't know who those people are.
Right.
And there are going to be people who have antibodies, but they're not enough. So
that's why, until that overall community transmission has really come down, we're not really out of the woods, either personally or as a community. So it's still important to do those other things, both for the variants and for our own personal protection. We want to prevent that surge, and we also want to protect our families and ourselves.
Yeah, I'm worried because there are some places that are opening up fully with only like 6.5% of their population immunized. And that's, it's good for, in terms of if they were just a closed border place, they can make their own decisions. But because we're so ubiquitous in where we go now in the US, when one place opens up, it just creates more risk for everyone because people travel a lot and so and it's not just one place, it's several. And so I'm a little worried, like you said, that we all want our kids back in school, we all want sports, we all want to go moving tiers, but again, a few key decisions and a few bad decisions can put us back to where we were before.
Yeah, especially like whole entire states. Basically, when you loosen restrictions, you're sending another signal that it's safe. And I hear people talk about that all the time. They're like, well, if it's safe to go to the grocery store, why isn't it safe to go to church? And I usually respond with, it's not safe to go to the grocery store. It's just people need to eat or they're going to die. So we're at this level here where it's all about like amounts of risk. And really, like, what we should have given out is, even though the store is open, it's not safe to be in there. So only go when you really need to. Like, I feel like that's the message that kind of didn't get across. So when we see these amounts coming down and states are lifting mandates and lifting restrictions, think psychologically that signals people that it's all good. And so, okay, well, I can't wait to get back and eat indoors. In everyone's feeling that way, so it's going to be pretty crowded, you know. And it's just, oh, it's very scary, because if those variants take off, 100% there's going to be another surge, and we could have avoided it just by hanging in there for another few weeks. So, you know, if there's another surge, that's going to take another couple months to come down on, and we're going to be having this exact same conversation in July, instead of talking about how wonderful it is that we got to go to Europe on vacation, you know.
Right. Or my
I'm like,
other concern is we're going to be back where we're not having school again, and we're going to have
yeah,
another, and that's, if everyone really wants that to happen, which I'm sure I want that to happen. We have to stay vigilant now so that that can happen, right? Not that we want to open up now and enjoy it now. Well, then we're going to pay the price later. So,
and I would love to be wrong. Like, I would love for us to be able to open up right now and magically somehow vaccinate 150 million people this month, which would be 5 times as many as we're doing per day, and be all good. But I don't think that's likely. So hopefully enough people sort of are practicing what we need to do to prevent spread of the virus, and our vaccination continues to increase.
right.
We have good news on several fronts as far as vaccine availability. Um, both the Pfizer and Moderna contracts were renegotiated in order to increase the number that and the timeline on which they'd be delivered. So we should have that actually improving, as well as the partnership between Merck and Johnson and Johnson to both manufacture Johnson Johnson's vaccine.
Right.
These are, behind the scenes, kind of major achievements to get these companies to kind of really go the extra mile in, they're already running full speed out, and basically to kind of help them even further, to really ramp up production beyond what they thought was possible. So I'm excited by this. It is good news, but again, it has to actually happen before we reap the benefits. So we'll see. Fingers
Yeah, and
crossed.
I think that, the message I want to send is, if we, like you said, hang in for another 5, 6, 7 weeks, we can get out of this. But if we don't, the ramifications of that is we could be in another 4 or 5 months of trying to get out of the mess we created. So, like you said, I hope we're wrong, but I'd rather be wrong on this side of it and say, another couple of months, let's really stay strong and tough, versus saying, well, the numbers are so good, let's open up, and then us be wrong, and now we're going to pay 4 or 5 months again of the same thing. So,
Right, and end up with another 100,000 people who've died.
right.
Um, it's not just the 500,000 plus Americans who've died, but it's also the probably hundreds of thousands of people with long-term symptoms that we're learning about, and we're starting to pay more attention to, and they've put together some initiatives to help study and come up with some approaches that hopefully will help these people. But every single time we have another surge, we're creating a lot more of these people who are having really serious disabling symptoms. Yeah, and so we'd like to prevent that as well.
Yeah. So I think that's all the time we have, because we have another show, Your Personal Health. So we'd love to see you there where we talk about primary care and health. And we'll catch you next week. Thank you for joining us.